Hi guys, welcome to Life with Gaz. Now in this episode today we're going to repair a rod that I broke, which is this one of my favourites, and it's actually broke the tip eye off there, and that tip snapped off, just the eye itself, so the rod is useless without it. Now since I'm fixing rods, I've got another rod just here, and this rod has lost the insert out of this bottom eye, so I'm going to replace that bottom eye just there. If you look at this bottom eye, it's just the metal ring, and that'll shear your line off, so I want it to look more like this. Now if you stick with us, what I'm going to do is show you next what we use to fix these rods, and then show you the process which I'll go through as well.
What I'm using today is a glue gun, a lighter, and a craft knife, two different types of threads, tip eyes and also general rod eyes as well to fix these two rods. Can't forget the little Lego roller I made for moving the rods around. First of all, we'll start with the tip eye. Now just use a lighter to heat up the resin which is coating the thread to get that off, and then normally you can take the eye off at the same time because they're usually put on with hot glue, but this one didn't want to shift, so I actually cut this one off. But back to removing the old thread, just make one cut along the length of it, make sure you're not cutting into the rod, and then unpeel it just like you can see here. I'm using a junior axle just to cut the tip of this rod off, just because I want a nice clean cut and I need to be delicate with it as well. You can see I'm rotating the rod as I'm cutting, and this is so the rod doesn't splinter. Lego's not the best support for this, but it did the job there. Now, once I've cut all the way around it, then I'll just cut straight through the middle. Next, I've got to choose an eye that fits. Now, the ones I've got little collars on them, which are fairly standard for the rods which I repair. But sometimes they're a bit tight, sometimes they're a bit loose. So that's why I've got a selection of different cup sizes. Now I'm not plugging in my hot glue gun today. What I'm going to do is just shave little bits of hot glue off, and then I'm going to stick them inside the cup and then heat them up with a lighter. Now once I've done this, I'll put it on the rod, wipe off the excess, and then just give that a few minutes to harden off once it's all lined up. Although the hot glue can do its job and that can be sound the way it is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some thread just to finish it off and make it match the rest of the rod. Now I start by using an old fly tying bobbin that I've got, which keeps the thread coming out straight, which is handy. I'll give it a couple of twists and then loop it back over itself to hold that in place, and then I just rotate the rod until I get the amount of thread on it which I need. Now once the thread's on there, to finish it off and tie it off so it doesn't go anywhere, I get another little piece of cotton, create a loop, put a couple of twists around that, then I cut the original piece of cotton off, thread it through the loop, and then pull the loop back underneath the rest of the cotton, and that I can cut the tail off and it keeps everything where it should be. Then I'll repeat the process with a bit of silver thread, and what I'll do is I'll show you how I did that knot with a bit more detail and zoom in for you.
You've been so messy today.
Now you might be able to see her in the background. I've got my little 18-month-old apprentice, and he's learning how to repair rods with me.
No, this is how we grow them in shells. It's much more efficient.
So what's all this white stuff?
That is the mycelium. So when it's happy, it's growing as a fluffy grey growth. Once it's the right stage, it'll start to shock that mycelium. So everything freshened up will make it less happy. It starts trying to move, so it's going to mushrooms to its force.
And that rod now is all threaded up. Can sit on the side whilst I do the other one, and then I'll finish them both off together. Now this is quite a big eye to take off of the rod, so what I do is I heat up a line of resin which is holding the stitching in place, cut through that so I can get as much of a cut through it in one go as I can, and then what I'll do is heat round the entirety of the rod, right, being careful not to cook the thing, and then peel it all off just with my fingers.
And like from start to finish, that's 25 minutes. That's not bad. My zesty marmalade haddock with the quickest roast potatoes in the world. That's up my kitchen time.
Yeah. Max, away from it, Baba.
Nearly ready. Freeing up precious moments to spend with my favourite people.
And once you got enough of that stitching off, then it's just a case of breaking open the glue which is holding that eye in place and removing the eye, and that's generally not too hard to do. Next, just got to tidy up the rest of what's left on there. Now, I could polish this back up and get it looking like there was never an eye on there in the first place, but I'm not moving the eye, I'm just going to put a fresh eye straight over the top of that point. So just a bit of a general clean up, get the rest of that surplus resin off, and the last little bits of thread it's going to do for me. So now I'm happy with it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the next eye on. Now this is the largest one in the box, and how I put it on to initially hold it in place, I heat up one of the feet and then I put a couple of flakes of hot glue on there, let that melt, and then I attach it to the rod, line it up, give it a few minutes just to hold itself in place before I start whipping it on. And of course, when it comes to whipping these eyes on, I've got to whip them on both sides, not just a little bit at the bottom. Also, being much bigger, I've got to use quite a lot more thread to whip these things on to hold them in place. But when I'm whipping these guys on, it's very important just to make sure you don't cross your threads over once they've initially gone on, otherwise it'll look a bit rubbish. And then I use the same knot as what I use to do that tip eye as well. Just a little loop underneath, thread it through, pull it underneath, and then trim it off. Then it's just a case of doing exactly the same to the other foot on this eye. And this is what the leg goes for. You couldn't really see this on the tip because the tip was too narrow, so I had it further back up. But those Lego wheels, they end up using it as a guide, so as I can roll the rod over, it doesn't bounce around and move around, just stays straight. And once again, just going to finish this off with a little bit of silver thread to make it match the rest of the rod. Then I just mix up a bit of 2-pack resin, and this is where I forgot my paintbrush, so I improvised using a bit of tissue just to give that a coating around those threads. Now this will stop those threads from unravelling, it'll keep them watertight, and also it'll make them look smart as well, giving it the same shine as the rest of the rod. Now when the resin's still wet, you can just wipe off the excess and tidy that up just with a bit of tissue. Keep rotating it as it's drying, and that'll stop any drips forming and it'll smooth the whole thing out. But that's the finished article, and I'm ready to go fishing with it as soon as that hardens.
If you enjoyed this episode of Life with Gaz, make sure you hit the subscribe button down here and check out some of my other videos of my latest down here, and also my playlist up there.
I've seen it, yeah, if you don't feel that, then that's different. So it's complicated, isn't it? I don't want to